Trump is tearing apart a century-old symbol of unity between America and Canada, and it's happening at the most unlikely place imaginable. The Haskell Free Library and Opera House, a Victorian palace to art, culture, and education that literally straddles the border between Vermont and Quebec, is now facing the most restrictive future in its 120-year history. This isn't just about a library, it's about destroying what Martha Stewart Haskell envisioned in 1901 when she built this architectural marvel specifically to welcome both communities as family. But Trump's border crackdown has shattered that vision, and the implications go far beyond what you might expect. To understand why this matters so much, we need to step inside this remarkable building. Picture this. You walk through the front door in Darby Line, Vermont, and suddenly you're standing on a black line painted across the hardwood floor. Step over that line, and you're in Stansted, Quebec, Canada. No passport required, no questions asked, just the gentle squeak of century-old floorboards protesting under your feet. This has been the reality for over 100 years, where American and Canadian children, parents, tourists, and residents, French speakers and English speakers alike, have come and gone freely, treating this space as what it was always meant to be, a bridge between nations, not a barrier. Kathy Converse, an American who has volunteered at the library for 20 years, has witnessed this magic firsthand. She's seen generations of families from both sides of the border making this place their second home, their meeting ground, their shared sanctuary. When asked to describe what's happening now, she uses just one word: sad. And that single word captures something profound about what we're losing. But then came January 2025, and everything changed. The same day President Donald Trump was sworn into office, U.S. Border Patrol agent David Maland was shot and killed during a traffic stop about 15 miles from the library. A Seattle woman has been indicted for his murder, and hundreds turned out on the streets of Burlington, Vermont, to say goodbye to a fallen officer. This tragic event became the catalyst for what would follow. A week after Agent Maland's funeral, Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, flew to Vermont to pay her respects. But she also made what library officials describe as a surprise visit to the Haskell Free Library. What happened during that visit would become a defining moment in this story. Sylvie Boudreau, president of the library's Board of Trustees, diplomatically describes Noem as very polite. But what unfolded next was anything but diplomatic. According to multiple witnesses, including Library Executive Director Deborah Bishop, Noem stepped up to the black tape marking the international border and, with a grin, began parroting Trump's taunts. Standing on the American side, she declared USA #1, then deliberately crossed the line into Canada and announced the 51st state. She repeated this performance 3 times, according to Bishop, who told Canadian outlet CTV News that there was no mention of Canada, just the 51st state. Bishop added that the comments were poorly received by people at the library, saying, "We welcomed her with courtesy and respect, and I think she should have reacted in the same way. She was in Canada. When you step over that line, you are technically in Canada, so maybe be respectful towards the people in the room who are Canadian." This wasn't just a diplomatic faux pas. It was a deliberate provocation that signaled what was coming next. A few weeks after Noem's visit, Boudreau received the notification that the building's literary loophole was closing, ending Martha Stewart Haskell's century-old vision of cooperation. "I'm getting emotional," Boudreau said, because Haskell's first mission was really to reunite people, not to divide. The changes that followed were swift and devastating for this cross-border community. Starting in March 2025, Canadians were no longer allowed to use the U.S. sidewalk that leads to the library's grand front entrance. Instead, they now have to report to a legal U.S. port of entry first, a requirement that fundamentally changes the nature of this shared space. The library was forced to convert a rarely used emergency exit in the back, on the Canadian side, into a new entrance. It's not as welcoming as the front entrance, but, as Boudreau puts it, for now, it'll have to do. The emotional toll on the community has been profound. It's like when you're losing a friend, a dear friend, Boudreau explained. You know, like, you backstab me and it's going to take a while before I forgive you. Canadian Susan Rothwell captured the fear that many now feel. "We didn't dare cross that border," she said. The psychological barrier that Trump's policies have created is perhaps even more significant than the physical ones. A spokesperson for U.S. Customs and Border Protection defended the changes, stating they were necessary because of incidents of smuggling and illicit cross-border activity around the library. But Boudreaux pushes back on this characterization. Around the library? Outside? Yes, we have people crossing often, but it's not because of the library, you know? She makes a crucial distinction. The library itself has never been the problem, but it's being punished for broader border security concerns. The Department of Homeland Security later issued a statement claiming that drug traffickers and smugglers were exploiting the fact that Canadians could use the U.S. entrance without going through customs. They added, "We are ending such exploitation by criminals and protecting Americans." However, library officials and community members argue that this characterization unfairly targets a cultural institution that has operated safely and peacefully for over a century. What makes this situation particularly tragic is the library's unique history and purpose. When Martha Stewart Haskell, a wealthy Canadian who married a wealthy American, commissioned this building in 1901, she deliberately chose to construct it straddling the border. This wasn't an accident or an oversight. It was a deliberate statement about unity and shared community. At that time, this was family, both sides, as Kathy Converse explains. The building was designed to be a physical manifestation of the idea that borders don't have to divide people. They can bring them together. The library's layout itself, tells this story of integration. The library collection, circulation desk, and stage of the second-story opera house are physically located in Canada, while the main entrance and seating for opera performances are in the United States. This wasn't just architectural creativity, it was a deliberate design choice to ensure that both nations had equal stakes in this shared cultural space. For decades, this arrangement worked beautifully. Families would meet here when separated by immigration policies. During Trump's first administration, when his travel ban prevented many Muslim families from reuniting, the Haskell became a sanctuary where Iranian families and others could meet their loved ones in neutral territory. The nationalities of those seeking to reunite at the library come in waves, according to Boudreaux, often mirroring policies affecting migrants from one country or the other. Just recently, she noted, 2 Venezuelan men entered the Haskell hoping to meet up with family members in Canada. But Trump's current policies are systematically dismantling this function. The new restrictions don't just affect casual visitors, they're destroying the library's role as a meeting place for separated families and a symbol of international cooperation. By October 2025, even Canadians with library memberships will be required to go through formal border clearance to access the building, effectively ending the free flow of people that has defined this space for 120 years. The community response has been remarkable, though. When the library launched a GoFundMe campaign to renovate the back entrance and make it more accessible to Canadian visitors, they asked for $100,000. Under 2 weeks, they raised $170,000 and counting. This outpouring of support came not just from locals, but from people around the world who recognized what was being lost. The library also received countless apologies from Americans upset with the way Trump has been treating Canada, according to Boudreaux. But the financial support, while heartening, can't address the deeper damage being done. Many Canadian neighbors, according to Boudreaux, now want to boycott the United States. Some are afraid to cross the border. It hurts me, and I get emotional. The psychological impact of Trump's rhetoric and policies is creating divisions that may last long after his presidency ends. The broader context makes this even more significant. Trump's repeated suggestions that Canada should become the 51st state, combined with his threats of massive tariffs, have created unprecedented tensions between the two countries. These tensions are playing out in real economic terms across the continent. Canada is mobilizing an unprecedented border security force.
CBSA, our CMP officers. Let me just focus on CBSA, the announcement we made today, adding 1,000 new officers. If you look at trade, we are expanding trade. There are a number of new ports of entry that are likely to come on board. If you look at Port of Prince Rupert, for example, it is expected to triple in terms of volume over the next decade. So there is really there's a real need to have additional people who are working at our borders. Right now, we have 10,000 men and women who are staffing the border with the RCMP and CBSA. This will be an additional 1,000 people through the CBSA front, and around 750 to 800 additional RCMP officers. This is about ensuring the safety and security of our borders, but also to facilitate trade as we expand trade across different parts of the world.
The federal government has announced plans to hire 1,000 new Canadian Border Services Agency officers and 750 to 800 RCMP officers, investing $1.3 billion in this massive expansion. While officials insist this is about enforcing Canada's own safety and sovereignty, the timing clearly responds to a mirror. I can pressure. The human cost of these policies is becoming painfully clear.
Inflation is up nearly 5% in the last year. Liberal deficits are driving inflation. The more Liberals spend, the more it costs Canadians at the grocery store. Will the Liberals get their inflationary deficits under control to make life more affordable for Canadians?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know where the party ops has been, but we know where the leader of the opposition's been. He spent the last week peddling dangerous far-right conspiracy theories about law enforcement in our country. He should apologize. While he's been attacking the rule of law, Canada's new government spent the last week announcing a new suite of affordability measures to strengthen the rule of law, crack down on crime, keep Canadians safe. This will be included in our first budget. I urge Conservative MPs to speak up, stand up, call on the leader opposite to apologize. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kitchener South, Kessler.
What Canadians care about is the cost of living, and the more these Liberals deficit spend, the more it costs Canadians at the grocery store. New inflation data today confirms this. All three core inflation targets are above target. Rent is up 5% over the year. Groceries are up 4% over the year. After 10 years of their deficits, the cost of living in this country cannot take anymore. So will the Liberals stay on focus, get their inflationary deficits under control to make life more affordable for Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Small Business, Tourism and Gender Equality.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians trust that our government has their backs. Why? Because we are making life more affordable, and we have cut taxes for 22 million Canadians. This is allowing Canadians to put more money back into their pockets. And speaking of food, Mr. Speaker, good news. Our government is making the school food program permanent. This is going to put $800 back into Canadians' pockets to actually...
General Motors has announced the indefinite layoff of over 1,200 skilled auto workers at their Ingersoll plant, adding to thousands more jobs lost in Oshawa and Brampton. The auto industry, once a symbol of cross-border cooperation, is being surgically dismantled by Trump's trade wars. Workers express anxiety about their futures, with one saying the stress and not knowing is very, very challenging. Even Trump himself has acknowledged the effectiveness of Canada's response. Speaking about the advertising campaigns foreign countries are running in response to his tariff threats, he noted they're doing very well with their efforts and expressed understanding of why Canada would mount such campaigns. He even suggested he would do the same if in Canada's position, before concluding that everybody's too smart for the escalating trade conflict. Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a stark message to the nation.
Technologique s'accélère. The world is more dangerous and divided. The U.S., as we all know, has fundamentally changed its approach to trade.
It's raising its tariffs to levels last seen during the Great Depression. And the scale and the speed of these developments are not part of a smooth transition, they're a rupture. And they mean that our economic strategy needs to change dramatically. And they mean as well, even though we both lived through time, or I lived through times of immense change, your future will not be the same as my past. Because my time as a student was marked by events of a similar magnitude, but in a very different direction. When I was your age, the Berlin Wall fell, leading to a long period of liberalization of the movement of goods, capital, and people, leading to a peace dividend. C'était une époque d'optimisme, d'espoir et de promesses. Et ces dynamiques favorisaient particulièrement le Canada.
Notre géographie enviable nous donnait l'accès à la plus vaste et à la plus dynamique des économies et nous tenait à distance de la plupart des guerres et des attentats terroristes qui ont eu lieu. So, because of these advantages, over decades our economy grew steadily more integrated with the United States through the Free Trade Agreement of the 1980s, the NAFTA Accord of the 1990s, and eventually USMCA agreement signed in 2018. Canada's trade increased by over 400% during that period, and our economy doubled in size. But this process, this decades-long process of an ever closer economic.
In a major economic speech, he declared that Canada's decades-long process of ever closer economic ties with the United States is now over. He explained how former economic strengths based on close U.S. ties have become vulnerabilities, with jobs in auto, steel, and lumber industries under threat from American tariffs. Our relationship with the United States will never again be the same, he emphasized, marking a dramatic shift in Canadian economic policy. The American people are making their voices heard.
Nation and other parts of the globe. Massive crowds turned out in major cities, including New York, Washington, D.C., Boston, and Chicago. Demonstrators also gathered in tiny towns like this one in rural Virginia and across the country. They all shared a singular message.
Simple words, no kings.
We want to show our support for democracy and for fighting what is right.
Protesters named immigration raids and President Donald Trump's deployment of the National Guard to certain cities among the reasons they came out.
He should not be able to conduct these overreaches of his power, invading cities.
As an immigrant here in Germany, it's really important to me that America was founded on immigrants, by immigrants, and the fact that they are trying to shut that out and rewrite history is a really big deal.
President Trump's allies criticized the rallies as gatherings of extremists. On Friday, House Speaker Mike Johnson said they showed how fringe the political left had become.
If you think about what's going to happen here tomorrow, you're going to bring together the Marxists, the socialists, the Antifa advocates, the anarchists, and the pro-Hamas wing of the far-left Democrat Party. That is the modern Democratic Party. That's where they've gone.
But on streets across America, the crowds were...
Massive nationwide No Kings protests have erupted with millions of demonstrators in over 2,600 rallies across all 50 states. Organizers called it an historic flood of nationwide protests against Trump's policies, including immigration raids and National Guard deployments. The scale of opposition suggests that Trump's divisive approach is facing significant domestic resistance. Local residents on both sides of the border are struggling with this new reality. Chris Blay from Darby, Vermont, and Pauline Lessier from Stansted, Quebec, are neighbors who had never met until they found themselves in the library together as these changes were being implemented. Despite living just minutes apart for decades, it took a crisis to bring them together. "We never thought about it," they said, standing side by side in the library. "We are neighbors." But now, for the first time, they're being forced to think about the line between them. The enforcement of these new rules raises practical questions that nobody seems able to answer. How exactly will federal agents monitor Canadian foot traffic to the library's front door? What happens to the children who have grown up treating this as their neighborhood library? How do you enforce international border controls in a building specifically designed to ignore them? U.S. Border Patrol has not responded to requests for comment about these implementation details, leaving the community in limbo. Vermont Senator Peter Welch captured the broader implications in a statement. Reports of Trump closing off Canadians' access to the Haskell Free Library and Opera House are troubling, and if true, an escalation in his rhetoric against our neighbor and ally. Vermont loves Canada. This shared cultural institution celebrates a partnership between our two nations. His words highlight how this local issue reflects a much larger shift in America's approach to international relations. The timing of these changes is particularly cruel. The Haskell Free Library has survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the Cold War, the September 11th attacks, and countless other challenges over its 120-year history. It has served as a beacon of cooperation through all of these trials, proving that even in the darkest times, people can choose unity over division. But Trump's policies are accomplishing what none of these historical challenges could. They're breaking the bonds that have held this cross-border community together for more than a century. What's happening at the Haskell Free Library is more than just a policy change. It's a symbol of how Trump's approach to governance prioritizes division over unity, suspicion over trust, and walls over bridges. Martha Stewart Haskell's vision of a space where borders dissolve in the face of shared culture and common humanity is being systematically dismantled by an administration that sees every international relationship as a zero-sum competition. The library staff and community members are doing everything they can to preserve what they can of Haskell's original vision. They're renovating the back entrance, continuing to serve patrons from both countries, and maintaining their commitment to being a bridge between communities. But they're fighting against policies designed to build walls, not bridges. As Sylvie Boudreau put it, standing astride the black line that marks the border inside the library, "It doesn't have to be this way, this is a choice. This is a poor choice and an uneducated choice." Her words capture the tragedy of what's being lost, not just access to a library, but a century-old proof that people from different countries can share space, share culture, and share community without fear or suspicion. The Haskell Free Library will survive these changes, just as it has survived every other challenge in its long history. But something essential is being lost, the idea that borders exist to serve people, not the other way around. Trump's policies are turning what was once the world's most beautiful example of international cooperation into just another checkpoint, just a no. Their barrier, just another reminder that in his worldview, every relationship is adversarial and every neighbor is a potential threat. The black tape that runs across the library floor was never meant to divide. It was meant to remind visitors of how arbitrary borders can be when people choose to see their common humanity instead. But Trump has turned that gentle reminder into a hard line that cannot be crossed, transforming a symbol of unity into a monument to division. That transformation tells us everything we need to know about the kind of leader he is and the kind of America he's trying to build.